Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Saya Bagus Habibi, NPM 23351047 dari kelas 6E. Di sini saya akan mempelajari cara menggunakan library React Native Reanimated. Di mana React Native Reanimated adalah sebuah pustaka animasi sumber terbuka yang canggih dibuat oleh Software Mansion yang memungkinkan pengembang untuk membangun animasi dan interaksi UI yang mulus dan berkinerja tinggi yang berjalan pada 60 fps langsung pada thread UI asli perangkat, di mana di sini fitur utamanya yaitu ada eksekusi thread UI, yaitu animasi melewati hambatan JavaScript dan menghitung nilai secara langsung pada thread UI. Selanjutnya, worklets, yaitu fungsi JavaScript berdurasi singkat yang dapat dieksekusi dalam lingkungan runtime native terpisah untuk menghindari penurunan frame. Selanjutnya, dukungan CSS Reanimated 4, yaitu versi terbaru memperkenalkan animasi dan transisi CSS seperti web yang sesuai dengan manajemen tata letak seluler. Lalu selanjutnya, animasi tata letak secara otomatis menganimasikan perubahan komponen struktural seperti masuk, keluar, atau penataan ulang tata letak daftar. Di mana sini konsep intinya, untuk membuat animasi, Anda terutama menggunakan 3 pilar fundamental dari pustaka tersebut. Dan bisa dilihat di sini, kode JavaScript-nya import animated use share value, use animated animasi style with Spring from React Native. Use share value yaitu menyimpan data reaktif yang menggerakkan animasi Anda, misalnya koordinat atau opasitas. Kedua, use animasi style menghubungkan nilai-nilai bersama Anda ke komponen visual menggunakan penataan gaya inline yang bersih dan berbasis hook. Lalu yang terakhir, animasi view, penggunaan primitif khusus untuk komponen standar yang memungkinkan Reanimated menyuntikkan perubahan secara natif. Dimana di sini ada contohnya, contoh implementasinya, JSX, JavaScript React Native. Nah, bisa lihat di sini. Di sini ada inisialisasi share numeric animation value, lalu associate the value with properties inside a custom hook. Lalu di sini kompatibilitas dan versi modern. Saat mengintegrasikan Reanimated, pilihan versi Anda sepenuhnya bergantung pada arsitektur proyek Anda. Bahas versi, di sini arsitektur utama yang diperlukan dan fokus fitur utama Reanimated 4 kali. Hanya arsitektur baru, turbo modulus atau fabric, animasi bergaya CSS asli dan worklet yang terpisah. Reanimasi 3 kali, arsitektur lama dan baru, alternatif jembatan, nilai-nilai bersama, transisi elemen bersama, dan kaidativitas UI. Catatannya di sini, jika melakukan upgrade ke versi 4, Anda harus secara eksplisit menginstal React Native Worklets, pustaka mandiri sebagai dependensi peer terpisah. Dimana di sini alur kerja instalasinya. Langkah pertama, install ekosistem paket. Jalankan perintah paket Anda menyempurnakan pustaka bersama dengan persyaratan worklet. Langkah kedua, daftarkan plugin Babel. Yang ketiga, bersihkan cache dan bangun ulang direktif asli. Mana di sini selanjutnya kita akan melihat tata caranya dari video ini.
Kamu tahu nggak sih, tool AI yang satu ini bisa bantu kamu buat konten apa aja dengan mudah tanpa perlu pusing mikirin ide dan promnya. Ini dia tool AI canggih terbaru dari Dreamina, namanya
Animations in React Native have been traditionally somewhat challenging, especially compared to web. But that completely changed. Software Mansion just announced React Native Reanimated version 4, and it contains long-awaited CSS animations and transitions. And you can use this stuff right now as of today in the beta. And we're gonna take a look at a couple of the code examples and what this means for React Native. So I highly recommend you also read through this article from Christoph. It highlights why Reanimated 4 is new but also familiar. This introduction is likely going to shape the future of Reanimated. One quote was, this is meant to make Reanimated for future-proof library for the evolving direction of the React Native ecosystem. And if you've been in the React Native ecosystem, you know that it's currently like really trending towards this concept of universal applications. And with Reanimated 4, you can now simply look up CSS animations and bring them into your React Native animation, which means every web developer can now easily get into React Native and create these kinds of animations, which will definitely make your application more vivid and just in general feel better. I'm a huge fan of like these subtle animations in applications. Let's take a quick look at some code examples. So here I am inside a new Expo application. The only thing I changed is that I added Reanimated at version 4.00 beta. So everything that you see in this video will likely change until the final release, although they said it's kind of stable at this point. If we look at the documentation for this, you're gonna see that in the React Native Reanimated docs, there are now two new sections about CSS transitions and CSS animations. They all contain some nice examples that you can easily bring into an application, and we're gonna just see a few of them in action. So in my code, I got started by adding a simple animated view. I will get usually like these red lines here because something isn't working entirely yet with like the types. However, if we look at this, we just have a simple box here with some background color. And if I click a button, we can easily expand this. So this red stuff makes it kind of hard to read. But you see that we got a transition property and transition duration in here now. So that means you don't really need to use reanimated like shared values all the time, which can like make some animations really hard to set up. For this easy stuff, you can really just use CSS animations. And let's bring in another one like this one here. So really cool pulse animations, and this is honestly just the beginning. I hear everyone, oh, these are still the basic examples. Yeah, I know, but still, these basic examples show what's general possible. Only problem here, again, is that my IDE doesn't really understand that these things are now available to our animated view. So if you give this a try, make sure you're using an animated view, and then you can apply this to your styling. Now, these are really basic things, but I found some pretty cool examples in both the React Native Reanimated documentation. So for everyone, if you want to try this out, go into the React Native Reanimated, make sure you're on the beta, and then go to apps. I think it's under, I hope it's under common apps, source, apps, CSS, examples, whatever you prefer, screens, real world. Okay, at this point, you finally arrive probably somewhere here. And then you can take a look at their examples, which are way closer. And I brought some of them in, and I also found this tweet from Christoph, who also shared a couple of examples here for simple button components. He also shared these straight from a GitHub link. So that's pretty nice, and I use them as well. Let's see if they work. So I created this glow button component, and we got this nice glowing button up here. And if we check out the code, it's pretty straightforward. Like, this is a button, there's a bit going on, and pressable. And the cool and interesting thing is now that you could import CSS from React Native Reanimated and pretty much use it like a replacement for Style Sheet to create your CSS animations, which will enable this. This is really super interesting. I got, again, the same issue like before, something with the types going on. But we got a couple of examples, pretty basic examples. Let's take a look at something a bit more. So I also found this campfire example, and again, it just works. Like, it works completely without any problems. I just had to make tiny changes from the repository to make this work, but overall, it's really not hard. If you're coming from the web, you can just define it with css.keyframes, and then you have your animation super tidy and nicely defined here in your React Native application. Really, this is amazing, and you get super cool things. You can even have like this space view I brought in. Just looking at this, I just need this in my own applications because it's so cool. And they said in the documentation that you can pretty much bring in any sort of code you find on CodePen. Which you definitely can if you're skilled. However, I had some issues. For example, this was the example I gave. If I copy this code and use it in the new React Native CSS translator tool they also introduced here, it's not really working. And I think this is probably because I'm an idiot and I don't know how to use these things. I already tried to resolve the sass variables to like the other stuff, but then still all these like and pseudo elements are not working for me. And then I gave up and I was like, yeah, well, whatever. I mean, it would be really cool to get these kinds of animations simply converted into React Native application, and I think we're not very far off from that point. So one thing I just want to point out here as well is that what you see in this view here, or in the campfire view, this is really native stuff. So I've been running this through Xcode, and if I now pause my debugger here and say debug view debugging capture view hierarchy, you can see that these things, they are native views. They are native iOS views. So React Native always renders to these native elements. And that's the great thing here. Even though these are CSS animations, Reanimator will make sure they run in the most performant way in iOS and Android. And of course, their CSS animations, they will of course work on the web just as fine as well. So super performant on the web as well here with Expo Web. No problem at all with my application. This was also my more than poor attempt to create my own animation using some CodePen examples and then transforming this. It's not too hard. I'm just not really good with the stuff, but I think smart people will create even better things in the future. Now, there are a few things I wanted to point out based on, this is again on the notes that you should definitely read through. So they are incredible, but CSS animations are not for every scenario. So they rely on a fire and forget model, which means they cannot respond to the dynamic external factors in real time. That means that the other parts of Reanimated, the shared values and the worklets you define, are still super powerful and will continue to be powerful in the future. That really means CSS is a new way for web developers and like for every React Native developer to easily add animations. However, they're not for every scenario. And also what I said in the beginning, the API might change because, well, it's a beta and they plan to restructure the main repository as far as I know down here. So there will be a new order. Some things will be like in different packages. But anyway, you can already try this out today, and I think it's a super interesting approach. This completely fits into the current picture and theme of React Native, where everything is like universal. But I think it's also interesting to point out that while we got, like, on the one hand, we got things as Reanimated 4 with CSS, we got Native Wind, which allows you to use Tailwind CSS in your application, and also all the latest React Native versions, like just the latest 0.77, have a new property related to CSS styling. We just, like with the last version, got Box Shadow working on Android and iOS. So all of these things bring us closer to the web, and it makes it easier for web developers to transition to React Native. On the other hand, we also have things like the Expo Apple Target that Evan Bacon was working on, which really allows like deep integration in creating widgets with Swift. Or we got the Expo modules in general, which makes it really easy to expose Swift or Kotlin functionality to React Native. So we really got like these two dimensions of making it easier and aligning it with the web, and on the other hand, allowing deep integration with native functionality. And I think this is the amazing thing about React Native right now. It gives you the chance to build epic applications no matter from which angle you come. If you come from the web world, it's going to be really easy. Use Native Wind, use DOM components from Expo. You will feel right at home. And Reanimated 4 and CSS animations and transitions is just another piece in the puzzle of universal applications. But on the other hand, if you come from iOS and Android and you're frustrated by native development, you're gonna see that with React Native, you're not limited. You can always drop down to your previous skills that you acquired, may it be Swift or Kotlin, and build native modules or expose cool native functionalities that you know about to your React Native application while still having the ease of like live reload, hot reload, and all the cool things that Expo and React Native bring to the table. So I said it before, this year is the year of React Native. We already have Reanimated 4 beta, we have EAS hosting, two big bangs right in the start of the year. Let me know what you think about Reanimated 4. Have you tried it? You definitely need 20 out. I will be Simon.
Baik, gimana di sini saya sudah mempelajari dalam mengerjakan React Native Animation. Sekian dari saya. Apabila ada kesalahan mohon dimaafkan. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.